Okay, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm here with Michael Hanson, who's the voice of Taura MMA. And I kind of, I like to let people, because I like to introduce people that maybe haven't done a lot of shows or a lot of podcasts, perhaps. Maybe you could introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, my name is Michael Hanson. I am a professional ring announcer. I am somewhat new on the combat sports scene as a ring announcer. It has been so far an incredible journey already so far. It's only been a few years for me. Um, Man, where do I start to introduce myself? Just speaking in broad strokes, I'm from New York originally. I was born in the Bronx. I grew up outside of New York City. I started acting at a young age, doing high school theater and stuff like that. I was not an unathletic kid, but I was not athletic enough to excel at sports. And I also sustained a lot of shoulder injuries playing football and basketball. So eventually I kind of stopped playing sports in high school. And it's not an uncommon story, but I eventually found my way into the theater and I fell in love with it. And I went to college for theater, for acting, and then I spent the past, 10 years of my life pursuing professional acting work. And along the way, I also fell in love with mixed martial arts as a fan. I've never trained in any kind of serious sense. Um, but yeah, in terms of being an MMA fan, I fell in love with the sport around 2008, 2009 when the UFC was really starting to take off, when it was, when Brock Lesnar, kind of entered into the sport and brought in a huge wave of popularity that he was bringing with him from pro wrestling. George St. Pierre, BJ Penn rivalry was going on. Of course, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz. A lot of fans like me entered into the sport seeing those two guys fight, I believe, their second fight, and remembering Mike Goldberg, screaming like the friendship is over. And as like a new fan, I'd look at my friends and be like, yeah, the friendship's over, guys. It's over. It's a feud now. So I got into the sport during those kind of middle years. I'll probably say. I remember being aware of Ultimate Fighting in those early '90s, throughout the '90s, and it just being this crazy thing. And then in like the early internet days, you just see videos of like UFC one, and be like, "Whoa, that's crazy." But yeah, I kind of entered in those middle years during the modified rules era, and just never looking back, man. I just fell in love with the sport. I grew up loving basketball, and combat sports kind of over the years just kind of crept in more and more and kind of usurped basketball for me as my favorite sport. In terms of ring announcing, like I said, I was a theater actor, a stage actor. I did a lot of independent films in New York, and along the way of loving mixed martial arts, one day I was just driving to work to my day job, and I just was like, man, I want to do that job. Like I think I could do that job, and I think I could do it well. And I was many years ago, and it always just lived in a dark corner of my brain of just a thing, like a secret dream job of mine that I didn't even tell anybody because it was such a pipe dream, but I could never get away from it. I could just never get away from it. Always in my head, I would go to bed at night so many times thinking about trying to be a ring announcer one day, just because I thought that was the coolest job in the world, man. And I couldn't get away from it so much that I just started cold emailing different organizations in the Northeast
Mm.
until a few years ago, one of them got back to me, and it was Friday Night Fights in New York City. And they apparently had a ring announcer who they were less than thrilled with. And I was audacious enough to email them asking for the job, and they gave me a shot. And here I am. A few years later, things have been going well. Other organizations have gotten wind of me. Taura MMA is Brazil's biggest mixed martial arts organization. Saw my stuff online and reached out to me, and now I'm their guy as well. So obviously I want to say about the pandemic that obviously so many people's lives have been ruined and affected in such terrible ways by this pandemic. Personally, the way that it has affected me the most is that the trajectory of I guess this new budding career has really got halted by the pandemic.
Mm.
Live sports, live entertainment was like the first thing to just completely go down like a Led Zeppelin, and that has been it's been a frustrating year for sure. So that I know I'm going on for a while, but that's like in a nutshell where I'm at, where I've come from.
Before the pandemic, did you feel like things were about to pick up for you?
Yeah, I mean, right before the pandemic, like I said, multiple organizations were reaching out to me. I just feel like I I was feeling really validated of like, okay, like I'm not crazy. Like all these years I've been just fantasizing about this job and thinking that like, man, I think I could do that. And and then everything shut down.
So I want to ask about the theater stuff because I know in New York, like Broadway stuff is pretty, obviously really big. Were you doing some of that stuff as well, or?
Yeah, I had done mostly regional work around the Northeast and the Midwest, a lot of repertory theater, and yeah, I had done a lot of stuff in New York as well. I did a lot of independent films in New York. I performed off Broadway, so but I stepped away from theater and I was pursuing a different degree in higher ed, and then during that time, I started getting pulled into different hosting jobs because people would be like, "Hey, Michael, you can like you're an actor, and but you're not like auditioning right now. So like, could you come host this?" And there was lots of little things over the months and years of just like a game night or a show or an award show, and that's also kind of what contributed to thinking I could be a ring announcer. Is this all kind of picking up little experiences here and there of hosting and emceeing things and being like, and just trying that on, figuratively speaking, being like, this works, this works. It's a great way to make money. Unlike theater, where man, a theater commitment is at least 2 months of your life, where you got to kind of shut down all other commitments to really commit to this thing. And whereas somebody asks you to go host an award show or something, and they say, yeah, just show up on this Saturday night and be on stage for a couple hours, and we'll pay you $500. And I'm like, it's pretty good money for a couple hours of work. So that was also sort of an impetus of me being like, if I could just find a way into the combat sports world, man, I think I could do it. So yeah.
So was Tar the one who gave you a break on this?
Yeah. Uh, they found my stuff on Instagram. Um, Man, my story so far is it's a real testament to the power of social media, man. Without social media, I don't know where I'd be. I mean, I just think about like the Michael Buffers of the world and how different it was, man, back in the I think Michael Buffer got to start in the 80s, and he literally just sent hard copies of like a headshot to different casinos in New Jersey, and that's how he got picked up. It's just so different now.
So, but I mean, how did a Brazilian promotion chose to reach out to you? You're in the U.S. They didn't have anybody in Brazil.
No, well, what happened was Taura has started doing events back in 2016 in Brazil, and they started in Brazil's southernmost state, which is called I think uh, Rio Grande do Sul, Rio Grande do Sul, um, and they got big in that state, and then uh, they went all over Brazil a couple years later, and then recently they decided to try to expand into the U.S., so mainly into Florida and other cities in the U.S. for in the coming years. So they wanted an American guy, so they scoured Instagram, they scoured the internet, and I guess they just typed in like hashtag ring announcer and found my profile, and then he reached out to me, and I sent him some extra clips and stuff, and they gave me a shot.
So, how many shows have you done for them so far?
Just two. But then that's the thing, is that the pandemic happened and then everything shut down. I did one event in Brazil and one event in Orlando with them, and then everything shut down, and they got hit really hard by the pandemic, and so I know that I'm in contact with them, and they're trying to make a comeback now for the end of 2021.
So, were there any other shows that you've been reaching out to or putting feelers out to?
Yeah, I still am the announcer for Friday Night Fights in New York. as well as another promotion in New York called Warriors Cup Muay Thai. Both those are exclusively Muay Thai kickboxing promotions. So those are the two that I've worked with so far. And I've also been in talks with a few different boxing and MMA promotions in the UAE, out in the Middle East, which is really exciting. But again, one of them reached out to me maybe 4 months ago, and things were moving in a positive direction. And then the guy reached out to me again and said, "Hey, our state just shut down, went into like another lockdown, so everything is kind of on ice." So that's what it's been.
But it's picking up pretty fast. Before that all happened, you were starting to get a lot of different interest.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So it's exciting. This is just taking it one one day at a time in this COVID world, man, of just trying to be a live events performer. It's really it was a weird time to get into this in that regard, in terms of COVID and stuff.
Well, we have some shows here in Oklahoma. Maybe I could put you on to. I don't know if they're
Hey, let's
needing
do it.
somebody, but
We'll
you know
travel.
that. Yeah, they have a XFL. I know. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dale Cook. He was a kickboxer a long time ago, and if you ever watched the Hickson Gracie documentary, Choke, maybe
Oh,
you
I
can
haven't seen
find
that
that.
yet.
Dale is pretty prominent in that video
Okay.
because he had a fighter that was in the tournament also.
Oh,
And
cool.
they also have like a freestyle cage fighting. So I know they're both still doing shows right
Yeah.
now. So, and they have a lot of casinos here. So
Either way, I
maybe I
think
could
it's a good time
direct you to
to
those.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm yeah. What's I'm the guy on the side of the road holding up a sign of like will ring announce for food or something like that.
So you feel like as a ring announcer, are you going to have to like, is it going to be a lot of bouncing around to different events, traveling constantly?
Maybe. I mean, I want to do this for two reasons. I want to do this the for the I want to say legacy, but maybe that's a little too lofty for now, at least. But I want to do it because, hey, man, you only live once, man. Um, that's it. And the other reason is for the money. Like I want to make money. It's like I said, hosting and emceeing is a great way to make chunks of money if you can do it well and do it successfully. Um, so if somebody's willing to pay me to be their exclusive guy and the price is right, then let's do it. Otherwise, yeah, I also just love doing it. Like I don't want to say like that I would do it for free, but it's that kind of mentality that I love it so much. I love being in the sport in that in such an intimate way. I mean, that's one of the best perks of the job, Todd, is that man, it's like the only people closer to the action than me is the ref and the fighters themselves. Other than that, nobody else has a seat as like or closer than me. Not even the judges, not the commissioner. No, I am cage side, I am ringside. That and it is just so amazing to look up and be like, wow, this is my job tonight. It's just the coolest thing, man.
Now, what were some of the shows you watched besides the UFC, or was it primarily the UFC that kind of put you on to mixed martial arts?
Oh, it was primarily the UFC that put me on. I grew up watching boxing with my father. Uh, and my dad grew up himself a big boxing fan in the 70s and 80s. And it would always teach me things like, the last thing a fighter loses is their power, all those kinds of
Mhm.
little phrases you hear. But in terms of as I was becoming a young adult, and the UFC was blowing up and creating a new industry more or less in mixed martial arts, me and my friends from college and school, we all kind of jumped in that bandwagon together.
Now, did you watch a lot of the HBO boxing fights? Because they had a lot of great cards back in those years.
Oh, sure. And a lot of classic fights with my dad. I mean, Hearns Hagler, I could rewatch that fight every year, man. And just he just marvel at it.
Now, who are some of the guys you remember from those years? Because there's a lot of them that I remember, but one I had on my show was Angel Man Freddy, who fought
Oh
Archer Gotti, and
wow.
yeah, he fought several people, and I reached out to him, and he did my show, which was really cool. You know,
Wow.
we
Wow, that's
talked on
really
the
cool.
phone. Super cool guy.
That's
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah. So,
That's really, really cool.
but I remembered a lot of those. Gotti Ward, Gotti Ivan Robinson,
Sure.
Angel Man Freddy, Floyd
For sure.
Mayweather Young. When he was young.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
incredible, you know, Julio Cesar Chavez. There were so many. I don't know what happened to boxing,
Senior.
but HBO had such a big stable,
Yeah.
and a lot of the fights were really good. What
Why
did
do you
you
think?
think? Yeah, what do you
Hmm,
think about that?
what I was going to throw it back to you. Why do you think, as someone who has been a student of the sport, of both sports for
Mhm.
so long, why do you think MMA has sort of overtaken boxing in terms of grabbing the national consciousness of young guys mainly?
Um, I think it's a combination of boxing. When HBO, they had a lot of fighters in their stable, you know, very good
Yeah.
fighters that they could match them up, you know. So pretty much, was it Saturday they were doing or Friday? I can't remember which day
Mm.
they would normally do it, but you know, the late night fight, HBO After Dark, you could watch just good fights every week.
Yeah. Oh, for
You
sure.
know, the fighters are incredible. They could get them matched up against each other. If you wanted to see so and so fight so and so, they
Hmm.
could make that happen.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think boxing over time that stopped happening. And I also think maybe the more violent aspect of mixed martial arts appealed to younger people. My dad loved the early UFCs because they were violent.
Sure.
You know,
And boy,
he
were
didn't
they.
really like the technique, but you know, I had grown up reading like Black Belt magazine. I lived in Saudi Arabia when I was a young kid, and they had a show called Black Belt Theater that was on Thursday nights, I think.
Yeah.
And so we watched a lot of the old kung fu movies. We traveled to Hong Kong several times. So I watched like the Shaw
Wow.
Brothers films. I grew up on a lot of these supernatural kung fu movies where guys
Wow.
have magical powers and things like that. So we
What
watched the early UFCs
yeah.
more with an interest of these different arts versus each other is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course,
Pure,
it's morphed
pure
into something
arts.
completely different than that.
Yeah, my dad lost interest in it as it became more mixed.
I
He
almost
thought it was
wish
more
that those
interesting. Yeah.
I almost wish that those early UFCs did have those modified rules, but kept the marketing of like pitting these different arts against each other. Because of course it's really not that anymore. Now everybody trains in MMA. You're not getting the boxer who comes in with one glove versus the jiu-jitsu guy who comes in a gi. Um, because I don't know. I feel like those early ones, man, you watch those and they're just so they're just so brutal. I mean, the stomps and the ground, and guys were allowed to headbutt each other, and the guys groin strikes were allowed. It was just I don't know. It was just kind of over the top.
Right. Kind of surprised that it was happening, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because it made it less that sort of gratuitous violence took away from the really cool gimmick of like, man, what if a taekwondo guy goes up against a collegiate wrestler? Like, who's gonna win? And then like the clock starts and they start, somebody headbutts the other guy in the nose, and you're like, oh, it's not really about the technique. So
Right, right. Yeah, the other thing is, you know, did you watch the Triller show, I assume, or
I
saw
did,
some of it?
I did.
Now, the
Some, yeah,
pay-per-view itself was kind of a disaster, at least the way some of the stuff that went on in it. But I
yeah.
think they did some things right there that
Such
boxing
a yeah.
doesn't understand. Less is more. They had shorter rounds.
Mm.
You know, I heard Chael Sonnen say too much of a bad thing is a bad thing. So, like, if you're watching 12-round fight that isn't very good, you got to sit through 12 rounds of it.
Yeah.
You know, they had shorter, you know, less rounds. I think it was like, what, 6, 8 rounds, most of the
Right.
fights.
Right.
So, less is more, you know, and I think they've also caught on to this gimmick of watching people fight that ordinarily wouldn't have fought. I mean, if Eddie Alvarez fights De La Hoya, I'm going to watch that. And I guarantee you,
Yeah,
a
you're gonna
lot of
watch.
people in MMA are going to watch that,
I'm gonna
just like
watch.
they watched Askren and Paul. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of people in the MMA world watch that. So people thought Askren was going to win, you know,
Because it's not
which
that
is
I
kind of
want to watch
surprising.
it. It's not that I want to watch it. It's that I have to.
Yeah. No, no, I was curious because it almost had that early UFC. Can Ben Askren win this boxing match, or
No,
is this
no.
YouTuber going to knock this guy out?
Hey,
You know?
I called it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I said Ben Askren is going to get lit up by this kid. Ben Askren is
Right.
40. He's retired. He's out of shape. He's a
Mm-hmm.
wrestler. And have you ever watched him throw hands? And have you seen Jake Paul? It's like, look, is Jake Paul a professional boxer? No. Has he trained in boxing since he was 12, like so many young boxers that come up? No, but he's 6'1". He's clearly a strong, young, athletic kid. And now he's been training in boxing for like, what, 3, 4, 5 years?
Right.
And he clearly can box. So I called it from the day the fight was announced. I was like, oh, this poor old man is going to get lit up by this kid. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I saw Henry Cejudo was saying on Instagram, I think a lot of MMA people are going to be surprised how many mixed martial arts fighters he can beat.
Mm.
You know, because Henry Cejudo did a lot of boxing also. You know,
Oh, sure.
he was a wrestler, but he also competed amateur boxing. He said, guys that do this seriously, you know, they're going up against even guys like Tyron Woodley. He was saying Tyron Woodley's got a big right hand, but if Jake Paul has the experience that I think he has,
Right.
he should be able to figure that out.
I
And he
mean,
said,
even
I think a
somebody
lot
like,
of fans of mixed martial arts are going to be surprised just how many people this guy can beat from our sport.
I think you're right. I mean, look, MMA and boxing are not the same sport. It's like we have to keep learning the same lesson over and over again. I mean, did you see clips of Tyron Woodley in the back, kind of jawing with one of Paul's one
Right.
of his camp guys who is like a young professional boxer? If they really did fight, that young boxer guy and Tyron Woodley, I'm sorry, Tyron Woodley, MMA welterweight champion, he's getting lit up in the boxing ring.
Right.
He just is. It's just a different sport. But like I said, to your point, I do watch because it is somewhat intriguing, depending on the matchup. But I also feel like I have to watch in the way that, like, when you drive past a car accident on the highway, you have to turn your head and look.
Yeah, and I mean, I would feel the same way with De La Hoya and Eddie Alvarez. You know, if De La Hoya takes it
Yeah.
seriously and got in shape to do it,
And that one is
I
kind of
wouldn't
the
be shocked
inverse,
if he
whereas,
won at
well,
all.
yes, like on technique, on skill.
Yeah.
But that also again intriguing is the opposite matchup where the boxer now. I mean, how old's De La Hoya? Is he in his 50s?
I think he's like 48, 49 years
Jesus.
old. Yeah.
Oh my God. What are we doing?
But I mean, Floyd was 44 when he fought Connor, you know? I think he was 44 or
Yeah.
45.
Yeah. Yeah.
And De La Hoya, I mean, if he takes it seriously and he gets in shape and, you know, he shows up where
He's
he's not
great.
out of his mind, you know, I mean,
Well, that too.
because I
I'll
think
say,
when Mayweather fought McGregor, right, as McGregor started to tire, you got Mayweather over here who's still miles ahead of him in skill.
oh my
So he
God.
just took the fight over. And I could see De La Hoya doing the same, you know, just kind of letting Alvarez
Right.
work himself out and then take the fight over.
And that is being, Conor McGregor is a mixed martial artist whose greatest skill is his hands. Obviously, everyone who knows anything about MMA knows that Conor is a great boxer in MMA. I mean, he is also going up against arguably the greatest boxer of all time. Arguably. I mean, I'll be transparent and say that, I don't know enough boxing to really be able to back up that claim, but I know who all, obviously the greats are, and Floyd is definitely one of them. Another thing that I actually like what Triller did on this past card is how Triller has made it into an event. It's not just a combat sports event. It's also it's an overall event. And I think I realized that when somebody said that Triller, this Jake Paul fight against Ben Askren, trended and sold like it was like the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I think that part of that is the musical performances. It is the production value. Is that if the Super Bowl year after year has some tremendous 30-minute halftime show with performances from Beyonce and Janet Jackson and, boy bands and all these huge cultural icons, why can't combat sports? Why the UFC has never done this? Huge boxing cards have really never done this. I've never seen that on a Lennox Lewis card or an Evander Holyfield card or anything like that, where like there's some kind of like a halftime show. Like imagine if the UFC did like an intermission musical performance, between the prelims and the main card, and it was like 15 minutes or 25 minutes or whatever. I don't know. I think that would be interesting, and I think that Triller, in this way, might be sort of like pushing the evolution of combat sports down the road? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, some people didn't like it.
Some
They
people
said,
hate
I
it.
just want to see fights. I don't want to
Sure,
see 5 performances in a row to start the show.
that's true too. Maybe that was a little too
Maybe they
much.
could cut it down to 1 or 2.
Yeah, for sure.
But Pride did some of that. You know, people didn't see it, but Antonio Inoki would come out and he would do a speech after the intermission. You know, they had it. Inoki, very famous wrestler, fought Muhammad Ali.
Mm,
You know, he'd come out and do his routine, kind of a comedy, you know, and he had like certain catchphrases he would say, and the audience would get really into it, you know, and they had the big, you know, the opening ceremonies that had music and lights and all that. So
yeah.
they did some of that that the
Hmm.
Japanese crowd liked, but some of the other shows in Japan didn't do that at all. So
Hmm.
I think it depends on who the crowd is. The Pride crowd was a lot different from, say, a crowd you go to watch like Shuto. Like if you ever went to Karakwan Hall, a
Hmm.
place you could probably end up going to someday as an
Hmm.
announcer because they still have shows there all the time.
Hmm.
Um, the fans there are only there for the fights. Like
Right.
you could have one of the most famous fighters in Japan walk in there and they won't bother him. They won't say a word to him. They're just hardcore fight fans,
Hmm.
you know, and the fighters sit around in the bleachers just like everybody else. But you go to Pride, that same person's going to get mobbed by the fans there. They're
Sure.
going to have their papers out, ask them. You don't see those scenes at Crockwin Hall. So maybe the crowd, I mean, I think UFC could do it. They did some of that with like when McGregor fought. I don't know if it was Aldo where they had Sinead O'Connor. Remember, she was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they did a little bit of that.
And it was special. It was like a special,
Yeah.
extra special thing about that event. Yeah, it's interesting. So who do you think Jake Paul is going to fight next? Do you think he's going to fight a better, younger MMA fighter, or is he possibly going to dip his toe into the pool of young pro boxers? Or is he
I
going to
don't
fight
want to
like
see him fight a boxer. I want to see him fight another MMA guy.
why?
I want to see a whole card like that, you know, the
Why?
cross fight. Well, you know, like I said, I lived in Japan, so I come from some of that. There are so many of those fights like that you probably never heard about.
Mm,
I remember Vince Phillips, who was another guy who fought on HBO. I don't know if you remember him.
mm-mm,
Big puncher, you know, he's a tough guy. He fought Masato in K1 Max.
mhm.
Masato, one of the great, you know, probably the best K1 Max fighter from Japan. And Masato just destroyed his legs, you know,
Yeah,
stopped him in like 2 rounds. But it was interesting. You know, the cross of the fight was interesting. You know, can
yeah,
Vince Phillips compete in this format? And I think
yeah.
MMA, like I said, Alvarez De La, I'm more interested in watching De La Hoya fight Eddie Alvarez than some other boxer. Me. I mean, because if he fights a good
Yeah.
boxer, he's probably too old,
Hmm.
can't do the things he needs to do to
Oh, sure,
win.
sure, sure, sure.
But Eddie Alvarez, he might be able to still outclass him,
Right.
you know. And I remember Mayweather Sr. when he was training Floyd, he said, when this guy Conor, when he gets tired, he gonna get real tired. You
Yeah,
know, you say, and then you can just do whatever you want to him, you know. And
yeah, yeah,
I could
yeah.
see De La Hoya doing that. You know, I don't know how he moves still. I mean, Floyd's kept himself in incredible shape
Oh,
forever.
yeah.
But if De
Do
La
you
Hoya still has 60% of what he had, might still do
I
it.
think if he does have 60%, he'll probably dance circles around Eddie Alvarez
Yeah.
in terms of pure boxing skill. Shifting topics a little bit. I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you think, just a question, do you think Conor boxes again?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Floyd
Uh,
rematch?
the money. It's the money. It's too intriguing.
Why is
Maybe not him. Maybe somebody else.
why do why do why do boxing headliners get paid so much more than MMA headliners? Do you know why?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know
another
why.
interesting thing. I mean, I saw a lot of MMA guys looking at the Triller paydays, and they're like, "Damn," you know.
That's why so many guys are calling out Jake Paul. They're all lining up.
Yeah, I mean, the lowest guys on the card were getting paid a lot more than, you know, headliners at the UFC in most cases.
It has something to do with the fact that the UFC is more or less like it's like a league, right? Does that have something to do with it? That they kind of it's kind
Yeah,
of a
I mean, they
monopoly
can
thing.
control the paydays, you know, and they can put their finger on everything, you know. they can say this guy's going to fight this guy and this guy. They don't really need a matchmaker. They just need someone to say fighter A is going to fight fighter B and B's, because they control all these guys. They don't need a matchmaker.
Yeah.
And also, they can say, well, we're just not going to let you fight if we don't like you.
Yeah.
I can put you on the shelf, and they can control what these people make.
100%.
As to where, the boxers, it's free for all out there. They can, you saw Canelo jump off of DAZN or whatever he was with, and now he's with somebody else. They can do whatever they want.
Better for the fighters for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but the same kind of applies in MMA, because the UFC isn't the only game in town. There's Bellator, there's ONE, there's PFL, which, by the way, both ONE and PFL seem to both be really making big moves, especially PFL. They brought on Anthony Pettis, a few other big signings. Kenny Florian is now on their broadcast team. Ian Parker is now also on their their like sports betting broadcast team with Jonathan Coachman. So they're like filling out their roster, both in terms of the fight roster and the broadcast roster, with some really big names.
Yeah, I like the tournament format. I was a big fan of Bellator, and Bjorn Rebney was running it. I don't know how much of it you watched, but he made it very simple. We're going to be on Friday night. Every Friday we have these tournaments. I think they had 2 going simultaneously. So you knew why people were fighting. If this guy wins, they're going to fight this. This is the bracket.
Right.
Right. The bracket is the bracket. UFC and, Bellator now, guys are fighting just for whatever reason. There's no real purpose behind it. A lot of times they just find whoever doesn't like each other the most, and these guys are going to fight. Right. And that gets old after a while, I think, and I think that's another thing Triller did good, is they kind of built up this weirdness of, of Paul versus Askren. But I like the tournament format. It's very easy to follow. Now, I don't know what days PFL is on or how to see it. I catch some of it sometimes on the internet. But Bellator made it very simple. We're on Friday night on Spike. Anytime you want to watch us, this is, anybody could follow it. So I like that tournament format. I think it's better for competition too. And, K1, what they would do in Japan is they had a selection show, almost like March Madness. They'd reveal the bracket on TV. Like the fighters didn't know what part of the bracket they were in yet. It's almost like a random draw. And I think that PFL could even do that. Just have like a show where they have their ping pong balls or whatever. And
that's really cool.
This is the bracket,
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that kind of bringing that kind of novelty to the sport, and not just having it be, these are the rankings and these are the guys who we managed to match up with each other because of logistics and their schedules and all that kind of stuff and negotiations. It's like, no, it's here's a bracket. You all are in a tournament. You got to win your fights if you want to win.
Yeah, I think PFL should do that. They could have a big thing on social media or whatever, however they want it, like a Super Bowl, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
They could have interviews with the fighters, and then they could have their little ping pong balls or however they want to do it, and boom.
Yeah.
First round match,
Yeah. Really cool that the PFL also, the other big name they have is Lillian Garcia of WWE fame. She's been the ring announcer for WWE for many years. I don't think she is anymore, but she's huge. Good for her.
Yeah, and they got Clarissa Shields, right, is going to compete in that.
Oh, that's right. Out of boxing. Here we go. See if she can defend a takedown.
I mean, I saw Ray Cooper's son when Ray Cooper was Ray Cooper Sr. was one of the pioneers of fighting in Hawaii. He was a guy I saw fight a lot when I was in my 20s, early 20s. And, he fought in Super Brawl. He was one of the early stars of fighting in Hawaii. He would just run through guys. And his son fights a lot like him, very similar. And he would just run over guys real fast. First round, boom, 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 boom. That was kind of how he was. So they're very similar, Ray Cooper Sr. and his son. Yeah. So, PFL. What do you think about bare knuckle?
Oh, man, I have mixed feelings about bare knuckle. So a friend asked me if I would announce for bare knuckle, and I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if I would. There are a few bare knuckle style promotions, but obviously bare knuckle FC is the biggest one. and their ring announcer is really good. I forget the guy's name. His IG is like Mr. Live Worldwide. He has a great voice. He has a good look. But I don't know, man. It's just I've watched bare knuckle boxing, and it just kind of makes my, I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me. I don't know why. What about you, Todd?
It has some of that early UFC where some people are like, I don't like this, I
Yeah,
don't like that
yeah.
this is happening, you know. Some
It's not
MMA
like there
guys
are
are
no
like that.
rules.
Right.
It's not like there are no rules. It's not like they're allowed to punch each other in the groin or anything. It's like it's pretty standard boxing rule set that they just have taped up wrists, taped up knuckles, and no gloves, and they get cut up, man. And there's just something about the aesthetic of that I don't know. It seems, and I'm a combat sports fan. It just seems too brutal.
But they're kind of aggressive too. Like when they got Paulie Malignaggi in there, I thought like, wow, how did they do that? And then they got
Yeah,
Paige Van Zant, which I think was a big signing for them. I don't know how much she's going to fight. And then they got
yeah,
Pearl Gonzalez recently, who's
yeah,
was pretty popular in Invicta. So
yeah,
they're
yeah.
making moves. They're trying to do something,
That's the thing. Bringing it back. That's another reason why I really wanted to, and I'm so excited that I kind of got my foot in the door in ring announcing because, as much as the UFC still is and probably will remain to be the biggest kid on the schoolyard, there's just the whole sport is just growing so much and so many. I mean, like Bellator, isn't Bellator owned by Viacom, or did
Yeah.
Viacom buy them out?
Yeah. Well, when Bjorn Rebney first created it, I think he started out, I want to say it was on like MTV. I don't know what they call it. The Spanish version of MTV
Okay.
is where Bellator is being shown. Then he moved it to Spike. I
Hmm.
want to say it was Spike. And Viacom, you know, controlled Spike.
Yeah.
And then I guess they felt they didn't see the direct. I thought Bellator's make a lot of moves. A lot of people were going after them. Like I think UFC had people, kind of going after them saying this is no good or their ratings are bad, blah blah blah. You don't hear that stuff anymore because Bellator's not really doing anything and no one
Yeah.
cares. But
Right.
before a lot of people were on social media saying, "Oh, Bellator's ratings on this Friday were terrible," blah 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 blah. You would hear that week after week after week, like on the forums and stuff.
Hmm.
And yeah, so Viacom brought Scott Coker in, so that's kind of where they're at
Yeah.
now.
Other than Bellator, though, like we already established, PFL making big moves. One has been making big moves. Even a company like Taura out of Brazil coming into the U.S. with bringing in big investment money, trying to get their piece of the pie of this growing pie that is mixed martial arts. That seems to be, I don't know if I don't know if this is a true statement, but it feels like mixed martial arts is like the fastest growing sport in the world. I feel like it might actually be like, I don't know, like futsal or something, but who knows? I think it's MMA.
Maybe celebrity boxing is. I don't know.
Maybe celebrity boxing is. Hey, who are you taking in that one? Lamar Odom or young Carter kid?
I had heard about that, but I didn't know, what show is that in?
I don't know. Celebrity boxing is it's its own organization.
Oh, okay. But I mean, I think this Triller stuff, like I said, I think if they do another pay-per-view, it's going to be huge,
Oh yeah,
especially
you're
if De La
absolutely right.
Hoya fights on it.
If De La Hoya's on it, that's going to bring in even more sort of true boxing fans that are going to put their eyeballs on it. But if Jake Paul fights again, if he fights an even bigger MMA star than Ben Askren, if he ends up fighting, I don't know, like a Woodley or something like that, that's going to be just bonkers, man. It's going to be
Yeah, he
bonkers.
can't fight anyone that's under contract with the UFC. Now, Woodley isn't under contract with anybody,
He's
so
free agent.
conceivably he could fight him, or he could. I mean, if he dug up somebody else, I don't think there'd be any interest because those people don't. Although Ben Askren really wasn't. I mean, he's kind of popular, but
Also, like, why did they choose Ben Askren? Like, it was just seemed like such a random pick.
well, he was like you. He went after the match. He
Oh,
has a
he went
big,
after it.
big mouth. Yeah, he did. He
Oh,
he
jeez.
he did everything he could do to get the match, and he got it. And Dylan Dennis is trying to do that, but he's under contract with Bellator.
That's right.
You know?
I am the Ben Askren of ring announcing. No, I hope not.
Yeah, you went out and you said I wanted to do, and he did that. He used social media to get that match. I don't even think Jake Paul knew who he was at the time.
Oh,
You know,
interesting.
but he talks good, and I don't think they felt he was a threat to win. I don't know if he's a great talker, but you know, he's kind of.
He
I think
seems
he's
like
decent at getting people interested.
I think that the best word for Ben Askren would be pesky.
Yeah,
He's a pesky talker. Like he's not nearly as good of a shit talker as like a Chael Sonnen,
right.
and he's not nowhere near. He's like miles away from the legendary status of like a Conor McGregor shit talk. But he's like annoying, and he knows that he is. And you're right. He got his wish. He got his what was like a $500,000 or $1 million payday.
I think he got 500,000,
Jesus, it's crazy.
which is probably more than all his UFC fights combined. I would think.
Probably, maybe his whole career.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and that's what I saw. Jeff Curran, he was a guy who old school fighter, and he was on Instagram Live, and he said, this is a guy who's probably had 40 fights,
Yeah.
and he said, I don't think I made 300 grand my entire career.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to fight Jake Paul,
Yeah.
but I was like, Jake Paul doesn't, he's not going to fight you. One, you're good hands, and two, he doesn't know who you are. You're retired. You've been retired a long time, but I mean, Jake Paul's not going to dig someone like that up. I wouldn't think.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be someone who has some appeal. I don't know, or somebody who's a character.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if he fought Conor, the world would explode.
I don't think that's going to be it.
Well, I mean, like you said, I guess since Conor's under UFC contract, that won't happen. But imagine if Conor, I don't know, breached his contract and said, I want out because I want to go fight
Right.
Jake Paul. And they said, fine, we'll let you out. And they'd make 200 million each or something like that.
You were going to ask me something and I cut you off. I don't remember what it was.
I forgot.
Were you going to ask me how people knew who I was or something, I think?
No.
Or how I got into this or whatever.
Yeah. How did you get
okay.
into this?
Back in the early days that you alluded to, there was one website that you could go to. Like real hardcore fans scoured the internet to try and find some way to talk about the sport. And I had this guy on my show. His name's Kirik Janis. So he created this website called, at the time it's called submissionfighting.com.
Yeah.
And it had a little screen, have like these two gladiators like moving in slow motion. This was in the early dial-up days of internet, right? And you had to log in at the screen to go into the forum. You couldn't see it otherwise. You had to have a name on the forum. So a lot of people had names on the forum, but I used my real name, Mm-hmm. So people already knew who I was from my name on the forums, And back then I was a lot more opinionated. I was younger, so a lot of people didn't like me very much.
Sure.
But a lot of the fighters that were around back then were on submissionfighting.com, like everybody. Mm-hmm. So we all know each other from back then, from the forums. Mm-hmm. Kind of like social media now. We all knew each other's screen names, But I was like one of the only people who have my real name. Yeah. And so, yeah, we all knew each other, and people came to Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii. I was in the military. So when I first got to Hawaii, I think it was 1996, this guy, TJ Thompson, he had a show called Super Brawl. Mm-hmm. So I saw an arena there. I got off the bus. I didn't have my car there at the time. And I walked up the arena because I wanted to see if they had any posters of events, concerts or whatever. And I saw Super Brawl, And I was like, man, they got their own UFC fights here, This is just like what I was watching, So,
yeah.
And there was a little number at the bottom, TJ's phone number. He had like a answering service. So I called that and talked to TJ. And yeah, so I would go to all the Super Brawl events. And then I went to Japan for a few years. I went to basically every Pride event that happened the 3 years I was there.
Wow.
I was going to events all the time. Shuto, K1, Pancrase, Pride.
My God.
Yeah. So that's all I would do. It's been, that's all I did was go watch fight events,
What was the biggest Pride fight that you saw live?
Well, I went to the Dynamite show in 2002, which was at a stadium, soccer stadium.
Oh, wow. Which one was that?
I'll have to show you that. But basically, that was at Yoyogi National Stadium. And actually, the day I got there, Japan beat Russia in the World Cup. Japan was hosting the World Cup that year.
Oh, wow. Tokyo.
So Japan won their first game ever in the World Cup the night I arrived.
Wow.
You know, so I watched that game on TV in the barracks.
Huh.
And yeah, Japan won 3 games. I think they beat Russia, and then they beat like Tunisia and somebody else, maybe South Korea or something.
Hmm.
But yeah, so there was a lot of World Cup fever. So Pride and K1 decided to capitalize on that and have their own little World Cup event. And
Smart.
I think there was, I want to say, maybe 92,000 people
Whew.
there.
My God.
Yeah. I'll have to show you the video of that. They got it. You can watch it on YouTube. But the
Really?
introduction is bananas.
Really?
Yeah. Just the beginning of the show is incredible. And it was unbelievable. I'll have to send that to you. But that was the biggest one. But the shows I really liked were the smaller shows in Korakuen Hall. I talked to a lot of fighters on my shows about Korakuen Hall. This is a
Hmm.
place where all the legendary fighters in Japan fought. And most of the shows happen there. They have
Hmm.
shows almost every night of the week.
Uh-huh.
Pancrase, Shudo.
Yeah.
They have shoot boxing, which is an event, like a standing event with submissions and throws.
Hmm.
No ground fighting, but
Hmm.
you can do like standing guillotine, standing
Yeah.
arm lock.
Trips and sweeps and
Yeah.
stuff.
And you can throw people for
That's
points.
cool, man.
They had a lot of incredible fighters in shoot boxing. And, so they had a number of events that
Yeah.
you could go to. And there's like graffiti all over the walls, guys who've signed stuff in marker. You can go there and see who's who of people, their
Wow.
names on the wall. Tito Ortiz, any famous fighter you've ever heard of, their names
Hmm.
on the wall over there. But it's kind of a grungy little, almost like a high school gymnasium sized venue. But it's all hardcore people, like
That's cool.
the Pride fans don't go to Shuto events. They don't go to Pancrase events.
Yeah.
They go to Pride events, you know, K1 events. They don't go to the smaller venues.
Hmm.
Those are the real hardcore fans. And, I was a big fan. A lot of us in Hawaii, we watched the Japanese fighters because TJ was bringing them over, the guys from Shuto. And they also had one rental store that was Japanese owned. So they had a lot of the Japanese events. So everyone that was in the MMA circles were all going to this video store and
Huh.
checking out the same videos,
Oh, how funny.
Shuto and stuff. So we knew who all those guys were: Rumino Sato, Hato Sakurai, Kal Uno, all these famous guys in Shuto. And those guys, they would just walk around Korakuen Hall. They would sit in the stands just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And they were the biggest stars of the event. And
Yeah.
nobody said anything to them. Nobody,
Wow.
you know, it was just a different kind of feel, different vibe.
I want to know, who is your favorite fighter all time across all combat sports? Who is like
Man,
your
it's
guy?
tough, man. Uh, dang.
Maybe top three. Can you give me three? Across
Uh,
Pride, K1, Pancrase, Shuto, all this stuff. UFC, early UFC.
I was big into the Japanese competitors, and I think that was partially because of my upbringing. I
Mhm.
watched a lot of the kung fu movies, from
Sure.
Asia, from Hong Kong. And so, Sakurai from Shuto was probably my favorite. Frank Shamrock.
Oh yeah.
Frank Shamrock, I thought was, to this day, to me, it was kind of like almost like a Michael Jordan sort of. Frank Shamrock was a guy when he beat Tito Ortiz. At that time, that was maybe one of the first huge fights the UFC had ever had. And
Mhm.
I remember there was only one bar showing it on Oahu at the time. Now there's like every bar on Oahu shows the UFC. But at the time, there was one. It was called Players.
Mhm.
And all the people from the mixed martial arts circle were there for that fight. All the guys who fought in Super Brawl, TJ was there, gym
Huh.
owners, everybody. And that was a big fight at the time, and Frank won. He was a little smaller than Tito, but I think, he showed other fighters, okay, I got to do this
Mm.
to be as good as him. He was the first guy really trained like a professional athlete. He kind of, I'm a real
Yeah.
athlete. I have machines and I have trainers and I have which most guys weren't doing at the time.
Right.
So I think he kind of showed guys like George St. Pierre and others that came after, this is what I have to do. And then George St. Pierre took that to another level, I think,
Hmm. Hmm.
because he kind of showed everybody again, all right, here I am. You have to get to where I am if you want to be on my level.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
Pretty
they were kind of
amazing. Yeah.
transcendent.
been amazing to track the evolution of the sport of mixed martial arts, how it has gone from a diverse roster to fighters who themselves have to have diverse skill sets of today. And I think George St. Pierre was maybe one of the earlier guys who was like, I'm going to be good at everything. I'm not going to come in with one skill set. He's a guy who started out as what, a karate fighter,
Mm-hmm.
and became an elite, amazing wrestler in
Right.
MMA and won so many of his fights with wrestling. John Jones is another one who's just good everywhere. He's not bad at just about anything. And now I feel like there's like another step of the evolution of the sport where everybody has to be at least good at just about everything. But now we're seeing like super specializers who come back into the sport, like a Khabib who comes in with one singular game plan and it says, try to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's so cool. So cool.
Yeah, I have a lot of interest in the wrestlers. I mean, when I first went to Japan, I was training a lot of wrestling at the time because they had a couple of Japanese guys who were teaching people on the base for free, and they would teach about 3 nights a week.
Hmm.
And yeah, I saw them beat so many people, and a lot of Navy guys that came in were ex wrestlers. That's why they were there. They wrestled in high school or whatever. And yeah, they would just thrash these guys.
Yeah.
The Japanese guys would. So I used to tell my friend, man, if these guys train for mixed martial arts, man, they'd be unbelievable.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what you're seeing with guys like Khabib and Islam Makhachev and some of
Oh,
these other guys.
yeah.
They can just do whatever they want. Hamzat, these guys are on another level. And they're different from the American wrestlers in that I think a lot of American wrestlers are like, yeah, I'll try a takedown, and if it doesn't work, I won't do it anymore. Or maybe I'll try it twice. These guys, no,
Yeah.
they're going to do it 100 times if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what separates them.
Hell bent.
Yeah.
It's disturbing to watch sometimes.
Right.
Man,
I'm going to do what I want to do, and there's nothing you're going to do to stop me from doing it. And I remember, I live in Oklahoma. There's a lot of great wrestlers in here. And I remember watching John Smith, who was a legendary Olympic wrestler, maybe one of the greatest freestyle wrestlers. And he kind of had that mentality. I saw him in an interview where he lost a match. But he said, and I went in thinking, this guy's not stopping my high crotch, no matter what. So he kept going back to it over and over, trying the same move over and over again. In hindsight, it was stupid. He even said that. But, I think these Khabib, Islam, these guys, that's their mentality. I'm going to do what I want to do. You're not going to stop what I want to do. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about me.
Yeah. You have to be worried about me.
Yeah. I'm only concerned with myself and my abilities. Nick Saban says that a lot. My dad went to University of Alabama. Nick Saban always says that we aren't worried about who we're playing. We're focused on our team.
That's so badass.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how they are. They aren't worried about people stopping their takedowns or stopping their forward pressure. They're just worried about, can they get better at what they're doing. Yeah. Little small increments,
Yeah.
I don't think they care about who they're fighting, honestly. They're going to do what they want to do. That's why they're so confident. Hamzat, he seems to be really confident, could be really confident.
I think so.
They have an arrogance almost, a quiet arrogance, except for Hamzat. Right. He's kind of, yeah, he's a little bit more of a trash talker. But they have that quiet arrogance. I don't think they believe people are going to beat them at all. They're going to do what they want to do, and they believe they're going to do that. They just make little increment steps better. That's all they care about.
I mean, Khabib, whether it was Michael Johnson or Edson Barbosa or Conor or Dustin or Gaethje, it's just doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know that feeling, and I'm sure people that have been in a wrestling room know that feeling where you just can't get out from under somebody.
Right.
Or they'll let you get up your knees just so they can bust you back down to the ground again.
Or anybody who's ever had an older brother.
But I mean, that's what Khabib does. If you ever watch, he'll let guys kind of get up to their knees, one knee or two, and then he'll just break them back down the mat. It's demoralizing. Yeah. But he's letting them do it. Yeah. They're not doing it. He's letting them get this little false sense of hope. Yes. Yeah. Just so he can break them back down the mat. And yeah, these guys that I trained with, they would do that. And it's demoralizing. And it's almost like you feel helpless. Yeah. And I see that look in guys that fight Khabib's eyes. You can see
They're like,
They're just
Jesus.
waiting for the time to run out.
They're like, yeah, can this just be
Yeah.
over? For sure.
Yeah.
Man.
But yeah, that kind of getting back to you're announcing stuff like as far as Tar and maybe some other things. I know you don't want to say necessarily who you're talking to, but maybe what do you see as far as maybe the next year for you or something? How many events do you think you might be involved with?
In the rest of 2021 and going into 2022, I mean, hoping that things open up and that local and state governments allow people to congregate again and allow live sporting events to just resume full swing, and so that small promoters can actually make money, because the small promoters, they don't have the TV deals that the UFC does. Um, anyway, not to get off track and political things, but we need audiences for these smaller and mid-tier promotions to be able to exist and to do shows. So assuming that all happens, I'm pretty hopeful that Taura is going to come back with some serious reinvestment. They're going to do hopefully a bunch of shows in Rio as well as in Orlando and maybe Miami. They should have a full calendar of shows maybe once a month. And also, I'm going to sprinkle in shows in New York with Muay Thai promotions, and possibly be going out to the other side of the planet, maybe, to announce some boxing out in the UAE, maybe.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I mean, I lived in Saudi Arabia for about 8 years. My dad was working for
Wow,
Aramco.
you've been all over.
Yeah, my dad worked for Aramco
Jeez.
when I was about, I want to say 6.
How many languages do you speak?
Well, I only speak like English, but I do speak some Japanese, some Arabic. I do
Wow.
know some.
Wow. Arabic. Wow. That's really hard.
Yeah, but and like Hawaiian slang, I know a lot of
Oh,
that
cool.
stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I it's real good talking to you and kind of hearing about some of the
Yeah.
things you're doing. And I
Thank you,
do
man.
want to ask you this: like, how do you go about preparing for a show?
Oh, sure, sure, sure. I reach out to every fighter on the card that I can. Hopefully everyone, not always because they don't always respond. I reach out to each fighter personally and I ask them their stats. Usually their record is provided by the promoter, but that's about it. So I'll ask them their height, their weight. I'm obviously going to get at weigh-ins and all that kind of stuff. I ask them their hometown, whether or not they have a nickname. I use the microphone function on Instagram to ask them um, to send me an audio message of how to say their name correctly, and to say it once, to say it again slowly, and then to say it again normally. Um, and again, this isn't for like John Smith's. This is for like, because as you know, like combat sports is like such a global sport. So I could be on a given night, I could be announcing a Brazilian, somebody from China, somebody from Northern or Eastern Europe, somebody from Russia, and it's all these different languages, all these different names. So it can be really challenging in terms of all the different sort of sounds that I have to put together for people's names, and also the cities that they're from are also can also be challenging. I ask them whether they want their nickname at the beginning of their name or in the middle of their name, and all that kind of stuff. And I just I write out my cards as early as I can, and I practice. I practice alone. I have this. My wife got me this gift. It's called the belt box. It's actually made created for singers. It's just like this foamy insert so that you just put it over your mouth and you can just belt your face off, and it takes it down by like 30 decibels. So basically you can like scream or sing and no one's gonna hate you. So my wife got this for me to practice at home. So I'll be down here. I'll be like, ladies and gentlemen, out of the blue corner and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it just like not just like the fighters, but practice, practice, practice. And I practice the names, and I do kind of I created for myself like a little I don't even know what to call it, like a training where I'll write out a bunch of hypothetical scorecards, and I make a lot of them. I make like a stack of them, and I shuffle them, and then I'll just draw them, and make myself read them as though I'm reading it in the ring. Um, and I, to challenge myself to read the score correctly, whether it's a split or a majority decision or a majority draw or a unanimous or whatever it might be. So that when I get to the fight night and I have a minute or two to look at the scorecard, then it's easy. So that's my little secret. That's my little trick, how I train myself.
Do you talk to other announcers at all?
I do. Again, social media is an amazing thing. It feels like a little fraternity, a little club. And I've reached out over DMs with a few guys, guys like me who are sort of mid-tier, trying to do the thing. Obviously not the big guys. They're too big for me, but a guy named Rishi Paniker out in the UAE, a guy named Jeremiah Gallegos, who is tremendous. Jeremiah Gallegos, he's the announcer for Golden Boy. And he just, man, his voice, he has just such a, I mean, his tagline is "It's golden time." I'm guessing because it's Golden Boy Promotions, but that is the word for him, because he has a golden voice. He has a voice from the gods, and he's also just tremendous at announcing. And he is the next guy, man. He's just great.
And so you haven't spoke to Bruce Buffer or anybody like that?
No, I haven't spoken to anybody who has more than 20,000 followers on Instagram or something like that. David Diamante is another guy. David Diamante got his start at the same promotion that I got my start at, Friday Night Fights in New York, and he only got his start, I think, in 2015 or 16. And now David Diamante he's a big name. He's doing Matchroom and he's doing big things, man. So power to him. But so
I think Bruce is pretty down to earth. He was on the forums even back in the day, and if you watch the early UFC events, the first few he did, I don't think he was necessarily that good. We used to give him a hard time,
Yeah.
and he was pretty ordinary. I think he started to improve, but
Sure.
I don't think he had a voice for it even at the time. I think he had to figure it out.
I think so. Well, he also kind of grew up with the sport of MMA, and he helped make it what it is. Mm-hmm. And his style really developed into this very distinct style that kind of has become synonymous, I feel, with mixed martial arts. And that I think mixed martial arts, in one way that it distinguishes itself and has distinguished itself from boxing, is that MMA is like action and blood and violence. And that was especially the way it was when it first started out in the 90s, and when with the early UFCs. And even though it has really evolved away from that, I feel like people still have this misconception about MMA. A lot of my friends who don't follow combat sports at all are like, "Oh, MMA." They're like, "It's so brutal," and I'm like, "It's really not anymore." But in terms of Bruce's style, kind of, he developed a style, whether consciously or unconsciously, to really go with that mentality of the sport, where he was the first ring announcer who really screamed. I mean, other than the Pride lady, or was it the K1 lady?
Lenny Hart.
Yes, Lenny Hart.
Yeah.
Who was not in the ring, right? She just was somewhere on a PA system, just screaming.
Yeah, Pride actually had several announcers. They had a couple they had one that was kind of like a comedian, so he sounded kind of bizarre, and everyone would laugh. He was popular on TV. And then they had another one, Mr. K. But yeah, so they had a few, and then they had Lenny Hart, obviously, who would do the stuff when they're walking to the ring. Yes. But when they got into the ring, she didn't announce.
Right.
They had their own Japanese announcers that announced.
Oh, okay. Because Lenny Hart was never on camera, right?
Right.
You just heard some screaming voice over the
precisely.
Yep. I mean, that was really screaming. But I feel like a lot of young guys, young ring announcers, whether it be in MMA or other kinds of promotions, you see I see the influence of Bruce Buffer in a lot of young ring announcers. And by young, I mean guys who are working small shows, who are trying, maybe want to go on and do bigger shows. And you really see the influence of Bruce in that a lot of guys think that they should scream and shout. basically. But in my personal opinion, nobody can do it like Bruce. Like, and so when I go in there, I'm not trying to be Bruce Buffer. I'm not trying to be anybody, but I'm certainly not trying to emulate any kind of style where I am like screaming and shouting and jumping around, because like that's Bruce's thing, and he somehow gets away with it and perfected it in a way that still like works for him and really elevated the sport, to be honest.
Right.
So yeah.
Because at first it seemed like he was just Michael's little brother, and
Right.
so people were like, "Who is? What is this?" Because he wasn't
Yeah.
anywhere near as good as Michael was. And at the beginning, it just kind of sounded like he was talking loudly. It was like his ordinary voice, just louder.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as to where
Yeah.
like Michael Buffer, his voice just sounds incredible all the time,
Yeah.
even when he.
Yeah.
So I think at the beginning, people were like, "Why are they using him?" But I think he has improved a lot. How competitive do you think this industry is from what you've seen?
Man, how competitive is it? It seems like the world's smallest job market, because there are like so few people who even have this on their radar as a thing that they want to do. But at the same token, there are so few jobs. There are so few open. Like, you find a promotion, great. That's one promotion. That means they have one ring announcer. And if they're already a promotion that are you found them, which means that they already exist, which means that they already have a guy.
Right.
So you just have to get stupidly lucky, like I did. So stupid lucky that I emailed different promotions until I emailed one that was less than happy with their guy that they had currently had and gave me a shot. And that's it. So how competitive is it? I don't know. I think it's probably pretty competitive because this is just such a small market, but we'll see.
And how much do you put out there? I mean, I looked at your Instagram a little bit, but do you put stuff out elsewhere? Or, you see Bruce Buffer talking on these UFC commercials and stuff, but do you put out like samples of your stuff on social media too?
Yeah. Yeah. I put up a bunch of different clips on my Instagram, also on LinkedIn. A couple of promotions found me on LinkedIn. It's funny because for years I was like, what is LinkedIn?
Right.
And then I finally got on there. I'm also on Twitter. Those are my three. I don't really have much bandwidth for much else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still untapped, the social media for a lot of things. I think it's helped. I mean, it's helped me with my podcast stuff that
For
I've put out
sure.
there.
That's how
Plus,
we found each other.
and I've tried to kind of stay obscure because I think a lot of the shows they talk to whoever's fighting in the event Saturday,
Right.
UFC.
Right.
Those guys do interviews. I could talk to some of those guys, but I try to talk to people I know who they are, but maybe the average person doesn't for the most part. And then I mix in people like you and other people that are in the new space of MMA. These guys before they've had their time, but they were highly influential. So that's kind of what I focus on for now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. I found you, but yeah, I found all kinds of new people doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Several of my guests are people I didn't really know them, but the majority are people I do know. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really cool, and I definitely want to put you on to some people. We'll see, that I'd like
Yeah.
to
Let's do it.
let you talk to, like
I live
TJ
in
and some of
Michigan,
these other
so
people.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it'd be interesting. TJ, he used to be the promoter of his event and also the announcer. So he
Okay.
would go home, and do like the play-by-play also.
Oh
He
wow.
did everything. So he made up this name for himself when he was in the ring. He said, "Let's go to the Tommy Dakota, our ring announcer," but it was really him.
Oh, how
So
funny.
he's a character. Yeah, he would do stuff like that. So he's like announcing himself, but he's
Yeah.
saying it's somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of interest. A guy that he was really close with is Monty Cox, who's
Oh
he
yeah.
he managed a lot of
Yeah.
yeah, and I have Monty on my show, and he's back into promoting and stuff. He's doing a lot of
What
shows
is his?
in
What is Monty's promotion?
right now. He originally had Extreme Challenge,
Okay.
which was one of the first MMA,
Yeah.
probably maybe the first handful, and he did a ton of shows. Now he's doing some kickboxing and all kinds of stuff, mixed
And
martial arts, boxing.
is he in the Midwest?
He is. He's in Iowa.
That's what
Yeah.
I thought. That's
Yeah.
what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to put you on to him. Some other people that I know and
Yeah,
see,
for
because
sure.
I definitely want to. And
Yeah, man. Anybody who needs a ring announcer or needs a new ring announcer or wants to try a fresh look, that's when because I still cold email different promotions,
mhm.
and that's my new line of like, if you want to take the pandemic as an opportunity to refresh your promotion and things like that, give me a shot.
Well, Monty's in on Facebook.
Yeah,
So if you're on Facebook, that's where you'll find him.
I'll find him
He's
on there.
not active on Instagram, I would say.
Okay.
He's kind of old school that way.
Hey,
But
he needs a ring announcer. I'm not too far.
as far as like, I like to let people, as that we're winding down this interview, maybe something you want to leave people with, and also where they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram mainly at the Michael Hanson. I post pretty actively on my story about my about my day to day with my son and my wife. But also I put up clips and stuff like that from different things. And once things get rolling again, I'm going to be putting up a lot more content. Other than that, you can find me. I'll be commenting on different fight cards on Twitter at Michael Hanson MC, and those are my two main things, man. So I'm just gonna leave it with keep your eye out. I'm really trying to make a push at this, and this is really, to be quite honest, this is like my dream job. So I cannot even believe that I've gotten this far. It is just such a thrill to be in this world now. So thanks for having me on, Todd.
Yeah, it's just the beginning,
Just the beginning,
probably.
man. And
I've so many people I've heard that from over the years. I didn't think, who just so I think it's just beginning probably.
oh, I hope so. Hope so. From your lips to God's ears. And yeah, we can do this again because there's nothing I love more than talking MMA, man. I could talk. We could talk for hours about different fights, old fights, favorite fights, fighters, and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah, for sure. I'd
let's
love to
do it
have you
again.
back on.
Love it.
And thank you for the time, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, Todd. And
It's
we'll
great
talk soon,
meeting you.
man. Yeah, you
Take
too.
care.
Take care.